In a small town tucked away in the heart of America, there lived a man who didn't stand out to most people. He was an ordinary guy, someone you might pass on the street without giving much thought. But if you took the time to really look at him, you'd see that he carried himself with quiet dignity. His name wasn't important. What mattered was how he chose to live his life. This man had faced challenges from the day he was born. A condition called cerebral palsy made it hard for him to move like others could. His right side was weak, and walking was something he couldn't take for granted. Every step required effort. Every movement came with pain. Yet he never let these obstacles define him. Instead, he found ways to make the best of what life handed him. People around town knew him as the friendly janitor at the community center, a place where kids played basketball, families gathered for events, and seniors enjoyed bingo nights. He loved his job because it gave him a chance to be part of something bigger than himself. Sweeping floors, cleaning bathrooms, and making sure everything ran smoothly wasn't glamorous work. But he did it with pride. To him, keeping the community center spotless meant more than just earning a paycheck. It was about creating a space where people felt safe and welcomed. That sense of purpose kept him going, even when days were tough. On one crisp autumn afternoon, after finishing his shift at the community center, he decided to take the long way home. The park nearby was one of his favorite spots. It was peaceful, especially this time of year when the leaves turned golden and red. As he walked slowly along the path, leaning on his cane for support, he noticed something unusual. At first, it was just faint sounds. Laughter, maybe. But then he realized they weren't happy sounds. They were screams. Stopping in his tracks, he squinted ahead and saw two teenagers chasing a young boy. The child looked no older than 8 or 9, and fear radiated off him as he tried desperately to escape. The teens were shouting things that sent chills down anyone's spine. Whatever their intentions were, it was clear they weren't good. And the worst part? There was no one else around. No parents, no joggers, no dog walkers, just the 3 of them. And now him. For a moment he froze. His mind raced with questions. Should he intervene? Could he even do anything? He wasn't exactly built for heroics. His body already struggled with everyday tasks, let alone running after troublemakers. What if he got hurt? Or worse, what if he failed and the boy ended up in even more danger? But then he heard the boy cry out again, louder this time. Something inside him snapped. This wasn't the time for doubts or fears. If he didn't step, in who would? So summoning every bit of strength he had, he started moving toward the scene. Each step was painful, each breath heavy, but he pushed forward anyway. When he got close enough, he shouted at the top of his lungs, trying to get their attention. "Hey, leave him alone!" The teenagers turned around, surprised to see someone coming their way. One of them smirked, clearly underestimating him. "What are you gonna do?" the teen sneered, gesturing toward his cane. But instead of backing down, the man swung his cane like a bat, forcing them to back off. It wasn't graceful or calculated. It was raw determination. For a few seconds, the teens hesitated, unsure of what to do next. That brief pause was all he needed. Grabbing the boy's hand, he pulled him away as fast as his legs would allow. They didn't stop until they reached the edge of the park, where a woman walking her dog spotted them and immediately called the police. By the time help arrived, the boy was trembling but safe, and the man was leaning against a tree, exhausted but relieved. Officers took statements asking both the boy and the man to recount what happened. The boy, still shaken, managed to explain that he had been playing alone in the park when the 2 older boys approached him. They demanded his backpack and started pushing him around when he refused to give it up. As the story unfolded, the boy's mother showed up, frantic and tearful. She hugged her son tightly, thanking the heavens he was okay. Then she turned to the man who saved him. Her voice cracked as she said, "I don't know how to thank you. You risked your own safety for my son." He smiled softly, brushing off her gratitude. "I couldn't just stand there," he replied simply. "No kid deserves to go through that." Little did he know this act of bravery would change not only the boy's life but also his own, and perhaps the entire town's, in ways he could never have imagined. The moments after the rescue were a blur of emotions. The boy's mother, still holding her son tightly, couldn't stop thanking the man who had stepped in to save him. Her gratitude was overwhelming. She hugged him, tears streaming down her face, and kept repeating, "You're a hero." But the man shook his head, uncomfortable with the label. "I'm not a hero," he said quietly. "I just did what anyone should have done." Despite his modesty, the scene quickly drew attention. Neighbors who heard the commotion began gathering around, curious about what had happened. Some brought water for the boy and his rescuer, while others offered words of encouragement. A few people even snapped photos on their phones, capturing the raw emotion of the moment. It wasn't long before someone uploaded those pictures online, and within hours, the story started spreading like wildfire. Local news crews arrived at the park shortly afterward, eager to get the scoop on what they were calling an extraordinary act of courage. Reporters approached the man, microphones in hand, asking if he'd be willing to share his side of the story. At first, he politely declined. He didn't want to relive the incident or draw attention to himself. All he cared about was that the boy was safe. But as more reporters pressed him, he finally agreed to say a few words. Standing there with his cane resting against his side, he spoke softly but firmly. "I saw a kid in trouble, and I couldn't just walk away. That's all there is to it." His words resonated deeply with everyone listening. Here was a man who, despite his own physical challenges, had put himself in harm's way to protect someone else. It was a powerful reminder that true bravery isn't about strength or ability. It's about doing the right thing, no matter the cost. As the day wore on, the police continued their investigation, searching for the two teenagers involved in the attack. Witnesses described them as older kids, maybe high school students, wearing hoodies and carrying backpacks. Security cameras in the area were checked, and officers assured the public that they wouldn't rest until the culprits were found. Meanwhile, the boy and his family were taken to the station to provide further details. Though visibly shaken, the boy cooperated fully, describing everything he could remember about the attackers. Back at the park, life slowly returned to normal. Families resumed their activities, joggers continued their runs, and children went back to playing on the swings. But the memory of what had happened lingered in the air. People talked about it in hushed tones, marveling at how close the situation had come to turning tragic. Many admitted they weren't sure what they would have done if they'd been in the same position. Would they have stepped in, or would fear have held them back? For the man who saved the boy, the aftermath of the incident was both humbling and exhausting. Strangers approached him throughout the evening, offering hugs, pats on the back, and heartfelt thanks. Some shared personal stories of times when they wished someone had intervened during moments of danger. Others simply expressed admiration for his selflessness. While he appreciated their kindness, the constant attention left him feeling drained. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and the weight of everyone's expectations made him uneasy. By nightfall, the story had gone viral. Social media platforms buzzed with posts celebrating the man's actions. Videos of interviews with witnesses and snippets of local news coverage circulated widely, accompanied by captions like "real-life hero" and "courage in action." Comment sections filled up with messages of support and calls for justice against the attackers. Even celebrities weighed in, sharing links to the story and praising the man's bravery. One post stood out among the rest, a thread started by a teacher from another state. She wrote, "Today, my students and I discussed this incredible story. We talked about how one person's decision to act can change the course of someone else's life. This man reminded us all that heroes aren't defined by their abilities, but by their choices." Her words struck a chord, sparking conversations in classrooms and households across the country. But amidst all the praise and admiration, there were also questions. Why had no one else stepped forward to help? Where were the other adults when the boy needed them most? These uncomfortable truths prompted deeper reflection. In a world where so many people scrolled past bad news on their phones or looked away from troubling situations, here was a man who chose to step up, even though he had every reason not to. The following morning, the man woke up to find his quiet life suddenly thrust into chaos. Messages poured in from friends, acquaintances, and complete strangers. Some offered financial support, while others wanted to organize fundraisers to help him with medical expenses. Local businesses reached out, offering free meals, gift cards, and services. One bakery even delivered a cake with the words "Thank you, brave soul" written in icing. Though touched by the outpouring of generosity, the man felt conflicted. He hadn't acted out of a desire for recognition or reward. For him, it was simply a matter of doing what was right. Yet, he understood that people needed something to believe in, someone to look up to. If sharing his story inspired others to be kinder, braver, or more compassionate, then perhaps all the attention wasn't such a bad thing. As the days passed, the man tried to return to his routine. He went back to work at the community center, sweeping floors and tidying up as usual. But things weren't quite the same. Visitors stopped by frequently, bringing gifts or simply wanting to shake his hand. Kids ran up to him, asking if he was the guy from the news. Parents thanked him profusely, their voices thick with emotion. Even his co-workers treated him differently, clapping him on the back and joking that he was now famous. Despite the newfound fame, the man remained humble. He continued to deflect compliments, insisting that he wasn't special. Anyone else would have done the same, he told anyone who praised him. But deep down, he knew that wasn't entirely true. Not everyone would have risked themselves for a stranger, not when it meant facing potential danger. And certainly, not when living with physical limitations made the stakes even higher. What surprised him most, however, was the impact his actions had on the community. Conversations about safety in public spaces became more frequent. Parents organized neighborhood watch groups to ensure incidents like this wouldn't happen again. Schools invited speakers to talk about bullying prevention and the importance of standing up for others. Even local politicians took notice, proposing initiatives to improve lighting and security in parks and recreational areas. Through it all, the man stayed grounded. He refused to let the attention go to his head, reminding himself daily why he had acted in the first place. It wasn't for glory or validation, it was because a child needed help and he was there to give it. As he walked through the park one evening, watching families laugh and play under the setting sun, he felt a sense of peace. Life may have changed for him overnight, but his values remained the same, and sometimes that was enough. The ripple effects of that fateful day in the park continued to grow, touching lives far beyond what anyone could have imagined. For the man who had risked everything to save the boy, life became a whirlwind of attention and gratitude. But it wasn't just about him anymore. His actions sparked something bigger, something that brought people together in ways no one expected. A few days after the incident, the local newspaper ran a feature story on the rescue. The article painted a vivid picture of what had happened, quoting witnesses, police officers, and even the boy's mother. It highlighted not only the bravery of the rescuer, but also the challenges he faced every day due to his physical condition. Readers were moved by the details of his struggle, the way he relied on his cane for mobility, the pain he endured with each step, and yet how he still found the strength to act when it mattered most. The piece ended with a powerful line. Sometimes heroes aren't the strongest among us, they're the ones who refuse to let fear stop them. That article struck a chord with people across the country. Letters poured into the newspaper office from readers near and far. Some shared their own stories of overcoming adversity, while others expressed admiration for the man's courage. One letter came from a woman whose son had cerebral palsy. She wrote, "Reading this story reminded me of my boy. He's only 10, but I hope he grows up knowing that his limitations don't define him. This man is proof of that." Another letter was from a veteran who said, "I've seen acts of heroism in war zones, but this is different. It's everyday courage at its finest." As word spread, the story caught the eye of national media outlets. Within a week, major news networks picked it up, broadcasting interviews with the boy's family, park visitors, and even the janitor himself. Though hesitant at first, he eventually agreed to sit down for a televised interview. Sitting in front of the camera, leaning slightly on his cane, He spoke candidly about his experience. His voice was calm but filled with conviction as he recounted the moment he decided to intervene. "When I saw that kid being chased, I didn't think about myself," he said. "All I thought was, what if that were my child? You don't need superhuman strength to help someone. You just need a heart that says this isn't right." His words resonated deeply with viewers. Social media platforms lit up with hashtags like Drow Everyday Hero and Drow Courage in Action. People posted videos sharing their thoughts, some tearing up as they talked about how inspired they felt. A teacher from Texas uploaded a clip of her classroom discussion, where students debated what they would do in a similar situation. "We talked about how easy it is to look away," she explained. "But this story shows us that looking away isn't always the answer." Meanwhile, the search for the two teenagers involved in the attack intensified. Police released sketches based on witness descriptions, and tips began flooding in. Community members rallied together, organizing patrols to keep an eye on the park and surrounding areas. Flyers urging anyone with information to come forward were plastered on bulletin boards, lampposts, and storefront windows. The message was clear. Justice needed to be served, not just for the boy, but for everyone who believed in standing up against wrongdoing. Amidst all the chaos, the boy's family remained at the center of it all. They were overwhelmed by the support pouring in from strangers. Cards, gifts, and heartfelt messages arrived daily. The boy, now safe at home, started opening up more about what had happened. At first, he was reluctant to talk, scared that reliving the memory might make it hurt less or less real. But with time, and plenty of encouragement from his parents, he began to share bits and pieces. He described how terrified he'd been when the older boys cornered him, demanding his backpack. How he thought no one would hear him scream, and then how relief washed over him when he saw the man limping toward him, cane in hand. "He saved me," the boy told his mom one evening, clutching her arm tightly. "He made them go away." Those simple words carried so much weight. To the boy, the man wasn't just a passerby who happened to be in the right place at the right time. He was a protector, a guardian angel who had stepped in when the world felt dark and scary. The boy's mother, too, couldn't stop thinking about the man. Every night, she replayed the events in her mind, imagining what might have happened if he hadn't intervened. Would her son have made it home safely, or would those teenagers have hurt him worse? The uncertainty haunted her, but it also fueled her determination to show her gratitude. She visited the community center where he worked, bringing homemade cookies and a handwritten note. "Thank you doesn't feel like enough," she wrote, "but please know that you'll always have a special place in our hearts." Her gesture touched him deeply. Though he continued to downplay his role in the rescue, moments like these reminded him of why it mattered. It wasn't about fame or recognition, it was about connection. Saving the boy had created a bond between two families who otherwise might never have crossed paths, and that bond was growing stronger with each passing day. One unexpected outcome of the story was the renewed focus on accessibility and inclusion in the town. People started noticing things they'd overlooked before: the uneven sidewalks, the lack of ramps at certain entrances, the absence of proper lighting in public spaces. Conversations shifted from merely celebrating the man's heroism to addressing the barriers that disabled individuals face daily. Local leaders announced plans to improve infrastructure, ensuring that parks, schools, and businesses were more welcoming to everyone. A group of volunteers even organized a fundraising event to raise money for disability advocacy programs. Through it all, the man stayed humble. He attended a few community meetings, offering input on proposed changes, but mostly he kept to himself. He didn't seek out praise or recognition, preferring instead to let his actions speak for themselves. Yet he couldn't deny the impact his decision had made, not just on the boy and his family, but on the entire town. Strangers approached him regularly, thanking him for reminding them of the power of kindness and courage. Some shared stories of times they'd hesitated to help, vowing to be braver in the future. Others simply wanted to shake his hand or give him a hug. By the end of the month, the story had taken on a life of its own. It wasn't just about one man saving a boy anymore. It was about humanity coming together. about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, about communities rallying around values like compassion, resilience, and justice. And though the man never sought to be a symbol of any of those things, he couldn't escape the truth. Sometimes, the smallest acts of bravery can spark the biggest changes. As the weeks went by, the story of the man who saved the boy continued to captivate hearts across the nation. What started as a local incident had grown into something much bigger, a movement of sorts, inspiring people to reflect on their own lives and the choices they made when faced with moments of crisis. For the man at the center of it all, life was changing in ways he never anticipated. One afternoon, while sweeping the floors at the community center, he received an unexpected visit. A tall, well-dressed man walked in, carrying a briefcase and wearing a warm smile. At first glance, he looked like any other professional visiting the facility, but there was something about him that stood out. His demeanor radiated kindness and purpose. He introduced himself as a philanthropist from out of town, someone who had followed the story closely after seeing it on the news. "I'm here because I want to help," the visitor said simply, taking a seat at one of the tables. The janitor paused mid-sweep, leaning on his cane as he listened. "Help?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "With what?" The philanthropist explained that he had been deeply moved by the janitor's courage and selflessness. "You risked your own safety to save a child," he said. "That kind of bravery deserves recognition, not just words but action." He went on to share his plan. He wanted to fund advanced medical treatment for the janitor, treatments that could potentially improve his mobility and quality of life. Additionally, he offered to cover the costs of making his home more accessible, installing ramps, widening doorways, and adding handrails where needed. For a moment, the janitor was speechless. His mind raced with questions. Was this real? Could such generosity exist without strings attached? Finally, he managed to stammer, "Why would you do this? I didn't ask for anything." The philanthropist smiled gently. "Because you remind us of what truly matters," he replied. "Your actions showed the world that heroism isn't about physical strength or perfection. It's about heart. And now, it's our turn to show you some gratitude." Tears welled up in the janitor's eyes, though he tried hard to blink them away. He wasn't used to receiving gifts, let alone ones of this magnitude. All his life he'd learned to rely on himself, to make do with what little he had. Accepting help felt foreign, almost uncomfortable. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just about him. It was about setting an example. If he turned down the offer, it might send the wrong message, discouraging others from accepting support when they needed it most. After a long pause, he nodded slowly. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to repay you." "You already have," the philanthropist responded, "by being the person you are." News of the generous donation spread quickly, adding another layer to the growing narrative. Local newspapers ran headlines like, "Philanthropist Steps Up," "For Unsung Hero," and "A Gift of Gratitude Changes Lives." People were amazed not only by the philanthropist's generosity, but also by the ripple effect of kindness sparked by the janitor's original act. It seemed that every good deed was creating a chain reaction, inspiring others to pay it forward. In the days that followed, the janitor began meeting with doctors and specialists recommended by the philanthropist. These appointments were unlike anything he'd experienced before. For years, he'd accepted his condition as something unchangeable, focusing instead on adapting to the challenges it presented. Now, for the first time, he allowed himself to hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. The medical team outlined a comprehensive plan, including physical therapy sessions, cutting-edge treatments, and even exploratory surgeries aimed at improving nerve function in his weakened limbs. They cautioned him not to expect miracles overnight. Progress would be slow and require immense dedication, but they assured him that the possibilities were promising. Each session pushed him to his limits, testing both his body and his resolve. There were days when frustration threatened to overwhelm him, when the pain seemed unbearable and progress felt non-existent. But then he'd think about the boy he'd saved, about the countless strangers cheering him on, and he'd find the strength to keep going. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about proving that resilience could overcome even the toughest obstacles. Meanwhile, the community rallied around him once again. Friends, coworkers, and neighbors organized fundraisers to supplement the philanthropist's contributions, ensuring that no expense would stand in the way of his recovery. A local gym owner volunteered to host free workout sessions tailored to his needs, while a group of volunteers helped renovate his home to make it safer and more comfortable. Every gesture, big or small, reinforced the idea that he wasn't alone in this journey. The boy's family stayed closely involved too. They visited often, bringing updates on how the boy was doing. To everyone's relief, the trauma of the attack seemed to fade with time. He returned to playing outside, laughing with friends, and enjoying the simple joys of childhood. Yet he never forgot the man who had saved him. Whenever he saw him at the park or the community center, he'd run up and give him a hug, saying, "Thank you for protecting me." These interactions warmed the janitor's heart. Though he still struggled with the attention, he couldn't deny the joy it brought him to see the boy thriving. It reminded him why he'd acted in the first place, to ensure that the boy could grow up safe and happy. Knowing that he'd played a part in that outcome filled him with a sense of fulfillment he hadn't known before. As word of his progress spread, invitations began pouring in. Schools, churches, and community organizations asked him to speak at events, hoping to inspire others with his story. At first, he hesitated. Public speaking wasn't something he enjoyed, and he worried about coming across as boastful. But eventually he agreed, realizing that his experiences could serve a greater purpose. His talks were simple yet powerful. He didn't use fancy language or dramatic storytelling. Instead, he spoke honestly about his struggles and triumphs. He talked about living with cerebral palsy, about the daily battles he fought just to get through ordinary tasks. He shared how fear had gripped him during that fateful day in the park, but how love and compassion had ultimately won out. And he urged listeners to look beyond their own limitations, reminding them that everyone has the power to make a difference. Audiences hung on his every word, moved by his authenticity and humility. Teachers reported seeing students step up to defend classmates who were being bullied. Parents noticed their kids becoming more empathetic, more willing to lend a helping hand. Even adults found themselves inspired to volunteer, donate, or simply be kinder in their daily interactions. It was as if the janitor's story had awakened something dormant within people, a desire to connect, to care, to act. But perhaps the most surprising development came from an unexpected source: the attackers themselves. After weeks of investigation, police finally identified the two teenagers responsible for the attempted robbery. Both were arrested and charged with assault and harassment. During questioning, one of them broke down, admitting that they hadn't intended to hurt the boy. They were just trying to scare him into handing over his backpack. Their remorse was evident, and they expressed regret for targeting someone so young and vulnerable. When the janitor heard about this, he felt conflicted. On one hand, he understood the importance of holding them accountable for their actions. On the other, he couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. Like many troubled teens, these boys likely came from difficult backgrounds, environments where violence and desperation were normalized. Instead of harboring anger, he chose to focus on forgiveness, believing that true change began with understanding rather than punishment. His attitude surprised even those closest to him. "How can you forgive them?" a friend asked during one of their conversations. "After everything they put you through?" He thought for a moment before responding. "Because I know what it's like to feel trapped," he said softly. "To think you have no other options. I'm not excusing what they did, but I believe everyone deserves a second chance. Maybe this will teach them to choose differently next time." This philosophy resonated deeply with others, sparking discussions about rehabilitation versus retribution. Some argued that leniency sent the wrong message, while others praised the janitor's willingness to extend grace. Regardless of differing opinions, one thing was clear: his compassion challenged people to rethink their assumptions about justice and redemption. By the end of the year, The story had evolved into something far greater than anyone could have predicted. It wasn't just about a disabled man saving a boy from harm. It was about the transformative power of kindness, courage, and community. It was about how one act of bravery could ignite a chain reaction, inspiring countless others to follow suit. And though the janitor remained humble, refusing to see himself as anything more than an ordinary person, those around him knew better. He was proof that heroes come in all forms, and sometimes they walk among us unnoticed until the moment they shine brightest. The weeks turned into months, and the man's life continued to transform in ways that seemed almost surreal. The treatments and therapies he underwent were grueling, but they also brought glimpses of hope. Small victories that reminded him why he had agreed to embark on this journey in the first place. For the first time in years, he began to imagine a future where his body might cooperate with him just a little more, where pain wouldn't dictate every move he made. One morning, as he sat in the waiting room of the physical therapy clinic, he struck up a conversation with another patient, a young woman who was recovering from a car accident. She noticed his cane leaning against the chair beside him and asked about it. He shared his story briefly, not wanting to make a big deal out of himself, but she listened intently, her eyes widening with admiration. "I can't believe you did all that," she said softly. "You're incredible." He chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm not incredible. I just did what I thought was right." Her response stuck with him long after their conversation ended. "Maybe doing what's right is what makes people incredible," she said. Those words lingered in his mind, challenging him to see himself differently, not as someone limited by his condition, but as someone capable of inspiring others simply by being who he was. As his physical progress became more noticeable, so did the impact of his story on the community. People began organizing events inspired by his courage. A local running club decided to host a charity race called Steps for Strength, raising funds for disability advocacy programs and medical research. Participants of all ages signed up, some seasoned athletes and others newcomers who had never run a mile in their lives. On the day of the event, hundreds gathered at the park where the rescue had taken place. At the starting line, organizers invited the man to say a few words. Standing there with his cane in hand, he felt a mix of emotions. Nervousness, pride, and gratitude all rolled into one. He took a deep breath before speaking. "When I saw that boy being chased, I didn't think about whether I could run or fight. I only thought about helping him. If my story teaches you anything, let it be this. We all have strengths we don't realize until we need them. So today, as you take these steps, remember that every step matters, not just for yourself, but for the people around you." The crowd erupted into applause, cheering him on as runners prepared to begin. When the race started, many participants chose to walk instead of run, holding signs that read "Every step counts" and "Courage over comfort." It wasn't about speed or competition. It was about solidarity and showing support for those who faced challenges daily. By the end of the day, the event had raised thousands of dollars, proving once again how one act of bravery could spark a wave of generosity. Back at the community center, things were changing too. Inspired by the man's dedication and humility, coworkers and visitors alike started treating the space differently. What had once been just a building where people came and went now felt like a hub of connection and purpose. Volunteers showed up regularly to help clean and maintain the facility, ensuring it stayed welcoming for everyone. Kids playing basketball stopped mid-game to thank the janitor when they saw him passing by. Even the elderly patrons, who often spent hours chatting over coffee, began referring to him as the heart of this place. Despite all the positive changes, the man remained grounded. He knew that fame was fleeting and that the real work lay in staying true to himself. Still, there were moments when he allowed himself to dream, to picture a life where he could move more freely, explore new opportunities, and maybe even inspire others in bigger ways. During one particularly tough therapy session, when frustration threatened to overwhelm him, his therapist offered some comforting advice. "Progress isn't always visible," she said. "Sometimes it's in the things you can't see, the strength you're building inside." Those words resonated deeply, with him. They reminded him that healing wasn't just physical, it was emotional and mental too. Every challenge he faced was teaching him patience, resilience, and self-compassion, qualities he hoped to pass on to others through his actions. Meanwhile, the boy whose life he had saved continued to thrive. His mother kept the janitor updated on his milestones, his first soccer game, his improved grades at school, his growing confidence around strangers. "He talks about you all the time," she told him during one of their visits. "You're his hero." The man smiled, though he still struggled with the label. "I'm just glad he's okay," he replied. "That's all that matters." But it wasn't just the boy who looked up to him. Teachers, parents, and community leaders started reaching out, asking if he would mentor kids or speak at youth programs. At first, he hesitated, unsure if he had anything valuable to offer. But eventually he agreed, realizing that sharing his experiences could plant seeds of hope in young minds. At a middle school career day, he stood in front of a classroom full of curious students, answering questions about his life and work. One student raised her hand and asked, "What's the hardest thing you've ever done?" He thought for a moment before responding, probably deciding to step in that day in the park. "My body doesn't work the way most people's do, so putting myself in danger felt scary. But I realized something important. Fear doesn't have to stop you. Sometimes doing the right thing means pushing past your fears no matter how hard it is." Another student chimed in. "Do you ever wish you hadn't done it? Like because of all the attention?" He shook his head firmly. "Not for a second. Helping someone is never something you should regret. Sure, the attention is overwhelming sometimes, but if it helps people think about kindness and courage, then it's worth it." His honesty left a lasting impression on the students. After the session, several approached him to thank him for his candor. One boy shyly handed him a folded piece of paper. Inside was a drawing of the park scene, with stick figures representing the man and the boy. Scrawled across the top were the words, "Thank you for being brave." Moments like these reinforced his belief that stories have power, the power to connect, to heal, and to inspire. As he walked home that evening, he couldn't help but smile. Despite the challenges he still faced, he felt a sense of peace knowing that his actions had touched so many lives. Even the attacker's case reached its conclusion, bringing a mix of relief and reflection. Both teenagers pleaded guilty to their charges and were sentenced to community service and counseling rather than jail time. During a court-mandated meeting between the victims and the offenders, the boy's family chose to attend, along with the man who had saved him. Sitting face to face with the two teens, he listened as they apologized, their voices trembling with regret. Though it was difficult to hear, he appreciated their willingness to take responsibility for their actions. Afterward, the boy's mother hugged him tightly, whispering, "You handled that beautifully." And for the first time, he realized that forgiveness wasn't just about letting go of anger. It was about giving others a chance to grow. As winter approached, the town prepared for the holiday season, and the spirit of gratitude was everywhere. Decorations adorned lampposts and storefronts, and neighbors exchanged warm greetings. The man found himself reflecting on how much had changed since that crisp autumn afternoon in the park. Back then, he had been an ordinary janitor, quietly going about his days. Now he was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the smallest acts of courage could create ripples far beyond what anyone imagined. Though his journey was far from over, he felt ready for whatever lay ahead. With each step, literal and metaphorical, he carried the lessons he'd learned, that kindness costs nothing but means everything, that resilience comes from within, and that heroes aren't defined by their abilities, but by their choices. And as he looked around at the community he had helped bring closer together, he knew one thing for certain. The best stories are the ones that keep unfolding, touching hearts and changing lives along the way. As the months rolled on, the man's story continued to inspire not just his small town but communities across the country. What had started as a single act of bravery in a quiet park had grown into something much larger, a testament to the power of human connection and compassion. People from all walks of life found themselves drawn to his journey, eager to learn more about how one person could make such a profound impact. One evening, as he sat at home watching the news, he saw a segment featuring a group of high school students who had organized a day of kindness in their community. Inspired by his actions, they spent an entire Saturday volunteering, cleaning up parks, visiting nursing homes, and helping neighbors with chores. One student interviewed on camera said, "We wanted to do something that would honor the man who saved that boy. He showed us that even when things seem impossible, you can still choose to help others." The man felt a lump rise in his throat as he watched the clip. These kids weren't just mimicking his actions. They were internalizing the message behind them. They understood that kindness wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It was about showing up for people, no matter how big or small the effort might seem. That same week, he received another unexpected invitation. A major nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting individuals with disabilities reached out, asking if he'd be willing to serve as a spokesperson for their upcoming campaign. The goal was simple: to raise awareness about accessibility issues and advocate for greater inclusion in public spaces. At first, he hesitated. Public speaking still made him uncomfortable, and he worried about being seen as someone seeking attention. But after some thought and encouragement from friends, he agreed, realizing that this was an opportunity to amplify voices that often went unheard. His first appearance with the nonprofit took place at a conference in a nearby city. Standing on stage, gripping his cane tightly, he looked out at the sea of faces before him. Some attendees were disabled themselves, while others were caregivers, advocates, or allies. All of them had gathered to discuss ways to create a more inclusive world. As he began to speak, his voice wavered slightly, but it quickly steadied as he shared his story. "I've lived my whole life knowing what it means to face barriers," he said. "Barriers that most people don't even notice because they're invisible to them. Uneven sidewalks, narrow doorways, lack of ramps, these aren't just inconveniences. For someone like me, they're obstacles that shape every part of daily life. But here's the thing. None of those barriers stopped me from stepping in when I saw a child in danger. Because helping someone isn't about what you can't do. It's about what you choose to do." The audience erupted into applause, many nodding in agreement. Afterward, dozens of people lined up to shake his hand or share their own stories. One woman, who used a wheelchair, told him how his words had given her renewed hope. "You reminded me that my disability doesn't define me," she said. "It's just one part of who I am." Another attendee, a father of a child with cerebral palsy, thanked him for being a role model. "My son looks up to you," he said. "He sees himself in you." These interactions stayed with him long after the event ended. They reinforced the idea that representation mattered, that seeing someone like himself thriving despite challenges could inspire others to believe in their own potential. It wasn't about being perfect or fearless. It was about showing up, day after day, and doing your best. Back in his hometown, the ripple effects of his story kept spreading. Local businesses began implementing changes to become more accessible. A grocery store installed automatic doors and widened aisles, while a popular cafe added a ramp leading to its entrance. Even the library reorganized its layout to ensure that shelves were reachable for everyone. These small adjustments may have seemed insignificant to some, but for those who relied on them, they made a world of difference. The man noticed these changes during his daily routine. Walking through the park one afternoon, he spotted new benches placed strategically along the paths, designed so that people using wheelchairs or walkers could rest comfortably. Nearby, workers were installing brighter lights to improve visibility during evening hours. When he asked one of the crew members about the upgrades, the man grinned and said, "This is all thanks to you." People realized we needed to do better. Though he appreciated the sentiment, he couldn't help but feel humbled. "It's not about me," he insisted. "It's about making sure everyone feels welcome here." Still, he knew that his actions had sparked something important, a shift in perspective. Communities often moved slowly, bogged down by bureaucracy and inertia. But sometimes, all it took was one moment, one story, to push things forward. Around this time, he also began receiving letters from strangers across the country. Some wrote to thank him for inspiring them to overcome personal struggles, whether physical, emotional, or financial. Others shared how his story had encouraged them to stand up for someone in need, even when it felt risky. One letter stood out. In particular, it came from a young man serving in the military overseas. "I read about you saving that boy," the soldier wrote. "Your courage reminded me why I signed up. To protect people, to make a difference. Right now, I'm far from home, facing dangers I never imagined. But knowing there are people like you back in the States gives me strength. Thank you for reminding me that heroes don't wear capes. They walk among us." Reading those words brought tears to his eyes. He had never considered himself a hero, but hearing someone else call him one filled him with a strange mix of pride and responsibility. If his story could give someone strength, even someone halfway around the world, then maybe all the attention wasn't so bad after all. As winter gave way to spring, the man's physical therapy sessions began yielding noticeable results. His doctors were cautiously optimistic, noting improvements in his balance and mobility. Though progress remained slow, each milestone felt monumental. During one session, he managed to take several steps without relying heavily on his cane. His therapist clapped enthusiastically, saying, "Look at you. You're proving every day that limits are meant to be pushed." He laughed, wiping sweat from his brow. "Don't get too excited yet," he joked. "I'm still not running marathons anytime soon." But deep down, he allowed himself to feel proud. Every step forward was a victory, not just for him, but for everyone who believed in his journey. Word of his progress spread quickly, prompting local media outlets to check in for updates. Reporters filmed segments showcasing his determination, highlighting both his challenges and triumphs. One anchor summed it up perfectly during a live broadcast. "This isn't just a story about recovery, it's a story about resilience, about finding strength in vulnerability and turning pain into purpose." Viewers responded overwhelmingly, flooding social media with messages of support. Hashtags like "Keep Going" and "Our Strength" in every step trended nationwide, accompanied by photos of people attempting their own personal feats, whether climbing stairs without assistance, completing a difficult workout, or simply smiling through a tough day. The movement became less about him and more about celebrating collective perseverance. Even the boy he had saved played a role in keeping the momentum alive. Now older and braver, the child joined his school's anti-bullying club, determined to pay forward the kindness shown to him. During a presentation at a local assembly, he spoke passionately about the importance of standing up for others. "If someone hadn't helped me that day, I wouldn't be here talking to you," he told his classmates. "So let's promise to look out for each other, okay?" The man attended the assembly, sitting quietly in the back row. As he listened to the boy speak, he felt a swell of emotion. This was the true legacy of his actions. Not fame or recognition, but the knowledge that he had planted seeds of courage and empathy in the next generation. Watching the boy confidently address his peers, he realized that perhaps the greatest gift of all was knowing he had made a difference. By the end of the school year, the town celebrated its annual Founders' Day festival, a beloved tradition marking the community's history and unity. Organizers decided to dedicate the event to the man, honoring him as a symbol of resilience and compassion. Friends, family, and neighbors gathered at the park where it had all begun, cheering as he accepted a plaque commemorating his bravery. Speeches were given, songs were sung, and laughter echoed through the air. Standing under the warm spring sun, surrounded by the people he loved, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. None of this, the treatments, the recognition, the friendships forged, would have happened if he hadn't chosen to act that autumn afternoon. Yet, as he looked around, at the smiling faces, he knew the credit didn't belong solely to him. It belonged to everyone who had embraced his story, who had turned inspiration into action, and who had reminded him that no act of kindness ever truly stands alone. And so, as fireworks lit up the night sky, signaling the close of the celebration, he whispered a silent thank you to the universe, to the boy, and to himself. Life had thrown its share of challenges his way, but it had also given him moments of pure grace, Moments that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that even the smallest choices could leave the biggest impact.